Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Lauren Foster, Content Director at CFA Institute and host of the Take 15 series. The episode you're about to listen to was recorded live at our annual conference in London. Be sure to check out other live recordings at annual.cfainstitute.org/live. Thanks so much for listening.
I'm Jason Voss, CEO of Active Investment Management Consulting. Joining me here in the studio is Malcolm White. For those of you who don't know Malcolm, he is a portfolio manager at Signature Global Asset Management, and he is routinely ranked as one of Canada's top 50 money managers. Not an easy designation to earn, I'm certain. And most importantly for today's discussion, he has a deep interest in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Malcolm, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So many people talk about AI, and I think it's become one of those terms that's sort of smeared in its meaning, right? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What are we talking about exactly, and what does it mean to you?
For me, it's really pattern recognition. It's the notion that we have all of this data out there. And finally, for once, we have the compute power and the capabilities to process all of this data. Now, the computer at billions and billions of instructions per second, per dollar, is at a level that the computing is so cheap, it can unearth these patterns. And we've never also had more data. Billions and billions of pictures are uploaded to the internet, data is discoverable, and with it we can mine and find patterns that humans may not see at a cost that humans could not do. So that's it, but it has multiple connotations. There's crazy connotations in the media space with the Terminator robots and things like that, but to me, it's not magic, it's mathematics.
Right, okay, I like that summary. That's super easy to remember and also true. So, what do you think AI is good? Now, is it good or is it bad? But what is it good for? What's a good application for AI and machine learning?
Well, one of the projects that I did was reading transcripts.
Yep.
So what you can do is you can actually train the AI to read text and mine it for sentiment. So is management saying good things, or are there bad things being said? And you can correlate that to how the stock price moves. And what you can do is train the machine to say, hey, if management or a company starts saying these things, it could possibly trigger this type of stock activity. Now, the benefit is, look, humans can do this work as well. But reading 35,000 transcripts in a matter of minutes and being able to process, that's something a human can't do. And it was actually something highlighted by our opening speaker, Daniel Pink, in terms of some of the research as well. So.
Right, yeah, so what I hear you dangle there a little bit is natural language processing. Is that what you're talking about?
That's just one of the areas, is natural language processing. There's finding patterns in stock market data as well. So an AI can mimic anything it can see. It can be as crazy as Shakespeare or tweets, but it could be time series data. And so in my panel, I mentioned how it could learn a sine wave or temperature or a stock market pattern. And then that could, again, automate, and we're really talking about cognitive automation, a process to help people do risk management or portfolio management.
So, of course, the converse is also probably a legitimate question. What is AI and machine learning not good at? And is that not good at a technological limitation, or is it just because of the nature of the way machines assess things, it'll probably never be good at? What's your thought?
There are things it's really not good at, and this was a question in my session. It doesn't understand the meaning of things. So what I mentioned was you can train an AI to learn recipes, cooking recipes. So you can feed it all of these cooking recipes, and then you could say to the AI, generate a new recipe to make brownies. And there's a great site called AI Weirdness that has these examples. It'll generate that recipe, but the recipe will call for half a cup of sugar. Okay, that makes sense. Then it'll go, maybe some baking soda. But then it'll say, and add another half a cup of sugar, and another half a cup of sugar, and then some more brown sugar, and then it doesn't understand that it's going to make one big sugar cube. It doesn't understand what sugar is or what water is. It'll say, fold the water. It understands, when you're cooking, you're folding things or cutting things. It doesn't understand water can't be folded. So I think that's it. That's the limitation.
I see. Okay, and so that's not a technological limitation. Let's like imagine a genie appears here, and you can rub the lamp, and the genie says, "Malcolm, I can grant you one AI wish, a technological wish." What's the wish? In other words, like what can we not do that you think we could do if we had the right technology?
It's judgment.
Yeah.
It's really judgment. That's something, again, it's pattern recognition, but to make it's sort of this intelligent sense that that there's this high level context and there's a high level meaning. So I sort of said like the artificial intelligence can't come up with something like the theory of Euclidean triangles. You know, that's something, it's such a high level of reasoning. Even I don't understand it sometimes, you know, how people conjecture this thing. But that's something that would be, you know, once it got that, then it would definitely open it up to other applications.
Sure. And you and I talked before you went live, and I serve on the board of an AI firm, and this is one of the limitations they talk about all the time. This meaning, of course, which many people know, but also just the judgment, right? And knowing what's true.
Yes.
An example of that, of course, is everybody had huge expectations for IBM's Big Blue, right? That it was going to cure cancer. The problem is there's no data on curing cancer. And so there's no pattern to look for necessarily. It's good at diagnostics, not necessarily coming up with the cure for cancer.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in companies that I cover, one of them, BlackBerry, up in Canada,
The Few, the Proud.
The Few, the Proud, yes. There's this notion of autonomous vehicles. So you can program the car to see items in the road and react, but you need to create almost a safety agent, like a judgment agent that sort of says, wait a second, if you see this and this and this and this, maybe we need to override this. So we almost need an artificial intelligence to watch the artificial intelligence to make sure that the artificial intelligence is acting in the bounds that we expect it.
In fact, there's
a safety inspector, so to speak.
Yeah, you may have seen a story last week, maybe in the week before. I've been on the road. I know you have been as well.
Yep.
Can't remember the timing. Might have been the FT. Doesn't matter. Anyway, researchers who are working on the autonomous vehicles, one of the things they did is they changed the shapes of stop signs. They just barely cut off the corner of it or made it look a little bit different, and everything was thrown awry.
That's right. I heard of one where, you know, the car drives by gauging lines in the road.
Yeah.
Well, someone drew lines around the car. They drew a box around the car, and the car couldn't figure out where to go because it's trying to, okay, I'm on the right of the line, and what's the right of the line in a box?
Okay.
And
Let's
exactly.
not digress too much. It's fun as it is.
No.
And the reason I don't want to digress is because it is an important subject. It is a funny subject when it doesn't work.
No.
But should financial pros be embracing AI? Should they be running from it? That's question one. There's a second part to that question.
Well, you know, financial pros are apprehensive. I don't blame them because the media has this notion of, and this came up in last year's conference. It was one of the top questions: is AI going to replace my job? They sort of see this power. They don't really understand the context of this power, and it's threatening. It's threatening for a number of people, just to say, look, we had this cognitive monopoly here, and whoa, we don't have a cognitive monopoly. In fact, the AI is better at humans and image recognition and facial recognition and language translation. So I think there's this nervousness. However, in finance, it's interesting. In traditional areas like image recognition, the AI can be 97% accurate. Or language translation, it could replace a translator. But in financial machine learning, you know, if it's 55% accurate or 56% accurate, it's good. So in other words, you still need a human to steer judgment. We talked about it. There's so much signal to noise. There isn't enough signal in the noise. You need to denoise it. And then you still need that safety instructor, the financial safety instructor, to be able to interpret, hey, did this decision make sense? Because you're only 55% accurate. You know, it's not a high enough level to entirely trust the AI.
Okay.
So there's a really valid place, and it's more of a hybrid, and this has shown up a number of times. It's going to be, look, we're going to use the AI to do cognitive automation, but the human still needs to be there for judgment.
The centaur, I've heard it referred to as, right? Yeah. I was at a conference and that's how they referred to it as. So the question, the second part of that question is, what should a finance pro be doing now, since it's early days still, to ensure that they're keeping a pace with the change that's coming?
You know, the thing that surprised me as a practitioner was how fast this is changing. This is one of the few industries, first of all, it's real. It's absolutely real, but it's accelerating.
Yeah.
My analogy is like, even just trying to keep up with the learning and the material, it feels like I'm drinking out of a fire hose. So that in itself can be overwhelming, but I think people, look, there's no doubt, and it's come up in other sessions, this is going to transform our industry. It's just a question of when, not if, when.
Yeah. Is
it 10 years or is it 5 years? I think all of us as professionals need to be oriented towards this thing, because there's the digital transformation that will occur in the industry, but there will be a digital divide. And I think eventually people are going to say, look, this is a person who gets data, gets machine learning, gets AI, understands how to incorporate that into their daily process. This is someone that doesn't, that's afraid of machines, et cetera. But it's such a powerful augmentation to labor, you can't ignore it. And so I think I think workers are going to get divided that way. And as I said in my lecture, you got to be on the right side of that. You don't have to be a data scientist, but you do need to be knowledgeable and understand the applications.
So would it be mathematics or software packages you would spend time trying to learn?
Well, this is interesting. I think it's a combination. It's a hybrid of all things. It's the data domain. What do you understand in finance and how can you apply it? So we've gone to our bond group or our currency group or our derivatives group, our equity group. They all have some interesting data domain. But then it's the programming part, which is required, and also the data scientists call that the statistical part, like, am I generating something? And it's actually all three. So it's a very unique individual. The conference talks about T abilities and shapes, and I think it's someone that can balance all of that. And I think there'll be a multitude of different roles, but you have to be digitally and directed towards that data and that element and feel comfortable in those worlds.
Okay, so let's now talk about neural networks.
Yes.
How do they work and how can they be incorporated into the investment process? And we're running a little bit out of time, so concisely, because I've got one more question I have to ask you.
Well, it's funny, what researchers wanted is they were looking at the human brain and how it works with synapses, and what a neural net is, a mathematical equivalent or modeling of the brain. But its power is just like the brain, it's a general purpose tool. So you can feed it pictures or patterns or time series, and you can train it and it will understand all of these things without having to do extensive modifications. So it's very good at general problems, which hardcore math isn't.
All right, so here's my final question.
Okay.
I think a fun question.
All right,
I know that you like to have fun, so
exactly.
let's do it. With no ante in the pot, just a best guess, what does the job of the investment analyst look like in 10 years relative to your thesis about AI and ML?
So I don't even have to be hypothetical. My son is 14 years old, and I said, well, what is my son going to be doing if he decided to go in this profession? And I think what you're doing is you're going to be actually working. If you're a portfolio manager, you'll be working with your associates, you'll be working with the rest of your groups and asset managers and risk management, but you'll be working with an army of AI bots.
Yep.
And they will be doing all of this functional work for you, screening, translating documents, tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, look, I noticed this really interesting pattern in Japan with this, supply chain checks, translating language, and packaging that all together to say, but you'll have this like hundreds and hundreds of these workers at your disposal, giving you this intelligence.
So one number, single answer, my final question. At what point does it get murky and you don't know what it looks like? My question was going to be, what's it look like in 25 years? How far out do you lose sight of what you think is possible?
I'm really looking only at 20 years or so.
Okay.
And I do have confidence there. So.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Malcolm. I really appreciate it.
Copyright 2019, all rights reserved. This program is designed to give accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is distributed with the understanding that CFA Institute is not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, tax, investment, or other expert advice. If legal advice or other expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional should be sought.